All right. What's up? Quick video on how to use Warcraft logs to get better at playing your character in Season of Discovery. So I'm here on Warcraft logs on the Season of Discovery tab, and you can see a whole lot of stuff here. Right now, Blackwing Lair is the main raid, but whatever the main raid is will be posted right here in the center. And there are a whole lot of ways to sort of measure performance in a raid. You'll see progress, which is how early in the phase your guild is capable of clearing the instance. You've got speed, and then obviously DPS, right? So let's assume that you want to do more damage. There's a very easy way to figure out exactly how to do a ton of damage, no matter what class you're playing. You may have to change specs, but for the most part, you can go to Warcraft logs, figure out who is best at playing your spec, and then copy exactly what they're doing. So that's what we're going to go through here, is sort of how to do that in this interface. So let's say I'm going to pick a class I know very little about for demonstration purposes, just to show how easy this is. The first thing we want to do is go to boss damage DPS here, and in Blackwing Lair, right? So I'll click View More, and this just shows us the top 100 parses for BWL. So these are the people doing the most damage, the top 100 damage dealers in Mythic BWL over the course of the entire raid. But this only includes bosses. So this is a pretty good way to, as you can see, I changed it to damage to bosses. It doesn't change anything, right? So this is just bosses over the course of a whole raid in Mythic, 20-player bracket, and this is all regions, all classes, all factions. So Horde and Alliance, every region. So if I play Warlock and I want to get better at playing Warlock, I can see a couple things right off the bat. One, in the top 100, there are a whole lot of Warlocks. It's pretty balanced right now, actually. We see a good mix of classes, but Warlock is definitely a strong class right now. We also see that they're playing Demonology based on the icon here. So we know they're probably spec'd most of their points into Demonology. And we see the runes here. And you can hover over each of these and sort of, if you're a Warlock, you're familiar with these. But it seems like pretty uniform. Every Warlock is running almost the exact same build, if not the exact same build, with Soul Siphon Haunt, Summon Felguard, Shadow Flame, Demonic Pact. So this is, from what I know of Warlock, a spec where you want your Felguard to do a lot of damage. We'll also notice that most of the runs where Warlocks are doing a lot of damage are pretty long. Like hour, 50 long minute runs with this kind of damage are generally parse runs. So the guild is really devoted to parsing and to making sure that everybody maximizes damage on each boss fight, not necessarily moving through the instance super quickly. There are some exceptions to this, like J-Fall here, who has a pretty crazy parse in 29 minutes. So, as far as I can tell of the players here, they're probably all very good, but I'm really interested in the players who are playing fast, who won't have their cooldowns up for every fight, who are in speedrunning guilds. So we'll just take a look at a random guy here, Riccolini, and we can see that he's running all the same exact spec, and he's using the Black Book and the Charm of Destruction from ZG. We also notice that most of the other Warlocks are running some combination of those, maybe Neltharian's Tear. And also these trinkets are, so this is a trinket column. Trinkets are not entirely representative, right? Like you can swap out trinkets throughout a run. So let's look at Riccolini. And this takes us into the log. So this is the actual full run. This says encounters all kills. So this doesn't include wipes. And this is just boss fights that we're looking at right now. So Riccolini did the most damage in the run across all the boss fights that happened in 29 minutes. So it's pretty impressive damage. So how do I figure out what Riccolini is doing as a Warlock? Like, how is this guy so good doing so much damage? Well, first thing I do is click into him. So I'm really just interested in Riccolini. Doesn't look like rocket science, right? They're casting Shadow Bolt, Shadow Flame, Curse of Agony, Corruption, Haunt, Shadowburn occasionally. And we also notice that the Felguard here with Melee and Cleave is doing a huge portion of damage with almost 30% of Rigolini's total damage. So whatever this spec is doing, it's certainly trying to optimize the Felguard. Okay, so this still doesn't really help me if I'm a Warlock. I need to know more. What do I do on, any particular boss fight, right? Like, what's my, in what order do I cast my spells? And so for here, we're going to click this drop down up at the top, which you can click anytime, and open up all the encounters. The best encounters to look at are generally ones that are pretty low variance, like encounters where you just kill the boss, right? It's a loot pinata. The Broodlord Lashslayer is a good example of that. And click into Broodlord Lashslayer, and so now we're looking at Ricolini's damage just for Broodlord Lashslayer. We can click off Ricolini here and just see that, yeah, he did top 3 damage on the boss fight, so this was still a pretty good fight for Rico. We see during this fight, Rico casted 18 Shadow Bolts, 4 Shadow Flames, 3 Curse of Agonies, and a Shadowburn. And then his Felguard did a whole lot of damage. So the first thing we want to check is what gear and what spec is Ricolini using for this particular fight. And this fight doesn't require any fire resist or anything like that, so this is probably just whatever optimizes his damage. And we can see 6 set Nemesis, which is tier 2. He's got a Death Mist headpiece on. He's got 3-piece from ZG, and he's got a whole lot of hit wherever he can get it. Band of Sulfuras, Zanzel's Band, and Key to the City. So this is, compare your gear to this, see how much hit rating this guy has, and you can get a pretty good idea of what you should be doing. You can also see gems and enchants here. I guess we don't have gems in Classic, but you can see enchants here. So, of course, Ricolini has optimized enchants with plus 1% hit from ZG, plus 1% hit from ZG. These tooltips are wrong, but he's got 18 spell power on his shoulders. He's got stats on his chest, and so on and so forth. So pretty typical loadout for a caster, but we now know, okay, Warlocks want to run 6-piece tier 2, and they want 3-piece CG. So what does the rotation look like? That's really the difficult thing to figure out, right? To do that, we go to, we can go to damage done, and we can try to like hover over and see what's doing damage at each point in this graph in the center, but that's not particularly helpful. What we really want to know is, what is this guy casting, right? So let's go to casts. And this is where the information can start to get overwhelming, but we can see at first that he's casting 20 Shadow Bolts, as we mentioned before. And we really want to know in what order he's casting all these things. So kind of the easiest way to do that is, as far as I can tell, is to click on all of the casts up here. And you can hover over each item in the timeline to see what Ricolini is casting at each time. So we can see Rico starts with a Shadow Bolt. They kill a Hatcher right as they roll into the boss fight. So that's important information. So this is cast Shadow Bolt on Death Talon Hatcher. We also see that he's killing some whelps. And then finally, the first global on Broodlord Lashslayer is Curse of Agony. So I'm going to assume that Broodlord Lashslayer was running across the room. Rico couldn't quite hit him yet. Open with Curse of Agony. Then Shadow Flame. Then a couple Shadow Bolts. Talisman of Ephemeral Power. More Shadow Bolts. Shadow Flame again. More Shadow Bolts. Another Curse of Agony, right, to re-up and keep that dot running. More Shadow Bolts. Shadow Flame, etc. So he's probably just doing this the whole fight. Let's just look at the things that are not Curse of Agony, Shadow Bolt, Shadow Burn. Shadow Flame. You can see that he's casting Shadow Burn on cooldown. That's important, or maybe not on cooldown, but when he needs to move, that's important. And he throws a life tap in here because he's almost out of mana. So pretty intuitive. We walk up to the boss, we cast Curse of Agony, Shadow Flame, Shadow Bolt. That's it. And we keep our dots up. During this whole time, of course, his pet is attacking. You just tell your pet to attack. But there's an easier view of all of this, which, you know, there's a whole lot of stuff up here at the top. So the easier view to look at is under casts, you can look at events. And so right now we're in tables, which is giving us this nice tabular view. And instead we can look at, well, you can look at timelines, which is basically what I just showed, or you can look at events. And events is the most granular that you're going to get. So this is going to show every cast that Rico starts, every cast that he finishes, how long it took him to cast each of these. And so we can see that this is exactly what I said before. So he finishes off a Whelp with Shadow Burn. Then he opens on Broodlord Lashslayer with Curse of Agony, Shadow Flame, Shadow Bolts. Shadow Flame to re-up the dot, more Shadow Bolts, Curse of Agony, more Shadow Bolts. Pretty simple rotation. And then if I want to know how much damage these are dealing, I just go to damage done. And we're still on events, right? And we can see he applies Curse of Agony, and the first tick ticks for 234. And then we can see his pet is meleeing and cleaving throughout the fight. We can see Shadow Flame is ticking throughout the fight, and then the Shadow Bolts start hitting. And they hit pretty hard. And so now I know exactly how to play Warlock. The only other thing that I need to make sure I understand is buffs. So for this, I'm going to go to buffs here, and then I'm going to go back to tables. And we'll see a few important things. One, he has Battle Shout on his Felguard. He's in a melee group. 2, he has all of the world buffs, right? DMF, Songflower, Dire Maul Tribute, etc. And we can also see that he is running Grimoire of Synergy. I don't know what this does, but he gets the Grimoire of Synergy buff about halfway through the fight. Looks like a pretty strong buff for 10% damage. And that's probably from a rune, right? Then we can scroll down. So that's all the damage buffs. We can scroll down, see defensive buffs. These are important to glance at, because occasionally there will be, you know, a greater fire protection potion or something in here that makes it easier for him to do damage. Because he's avoiding spell pushback. And then at the bottom here, we have various different uncategorized buffs that are also important to look at, where we see that Massive Destruction is, I assume, an ability he uses, and he uses it about 50% of the way through the fight. This is exactly the same time that he pops his Grimoire of Synergy. So layering those damage cooldowns together. Then additionally, we have Talisman of Ephemeral Power, which he uses before Massive Destruction, presumably because he can't use both at the same time. I think this is the Black Book, if I had to guess. The other trinket. And just like that, I understand how to play Warlock. Easy peasy. You can do this for any class, any spec, and know exactly what you should be wearing, what talents you should be. By the way, there are talents up here. If you go to the summary view, you can see it's 30 in Demonology, 21, and I think that's Destruction. And I know exactly what enchants I should have. I know exactly what my rotation is. And I don't have to look at any other sites for resources. Instead, I can always keep up to date with the best build by looking at the highest damage players on WarcraftLogs. That's pretty much it. Thank you for watching. Throw me a like and subscribe, and I'll try to keep making more of these videos. Good luck in raid.